A group of loud, unruly bikers roared into the tranquil city park, their laughter echoing like thunder, drawing the disapproving glances of families enjoying the warm afternoon. Among them sat a solitary figure on a park bench, a tall, composed black soldier named Marcus Reid, enjoying his rare day off. Mistaking his silence for weakness, the bikers decided to make him their next target. What they didn't know was that Marcus wasn't just any soldier. He was trained for situations exactly like this. What followed left witnesses speechless. The sun hung high in the sky, casting a warm, golden glow over the city park. Families strolled along winding paths. Children shrieked with laughter, and couples sat on benches, enjoying the rustle of leaves in the breeze. For Marcus Reid, this park was a rare escape from the constant noise of the world. The decorated soldier had spent years on active duty, facing dangers most people couldn't imagine. Now, he cherished moments like these, where peace could be savored. He sat on a wooden bench, his army cap tilted low over his face, his broad shoulders relaxed. Ducks in the pond glided effortlessly across the water, and a soft breeze carried the scent of blooming flowers. Marcus closed his eyes for a moment, letting the sounds of the park soothe him. But even he knew peace was often fleeting. Today would be no exception. The roar of motorcycle engines shattered the calm. Birds scattered, parents looked up nervously, and a group of 6 bikers roared into the park, their leather jackets glinting under the sun. They parked near the playground, revving their engines unnecessarily, drawing disapproving stares. Their leader, a burly man with a thick beard and dark sunglasses perched on his forehead, dismounted first, his movements deliberate and commanding. His name was Rick, and he carried himself with the arrogance of someone used to getting his way. Rick's gaze swept the park until it landed on Marcus. Something about the soldier's composed stillness irritated him. Maybe it was the lack of reaction to their noisy arrival, or his instinct to challenge anyone who didn't immediately cower. Whatever the reason, Rick decided Marcus would be their entertainment for the day. "Hey you," Rick called out, his voice booming across the park. Marcus didn't react. Years of training had taught him to assess before engaging. 6 bikers, average build, overconfident. They thrived on intimidation. But intimidation was wasted on Marcus. Rick took the silence as disrespect. With heavy boots crunching on the gravel, he strode toward Marcus, his gang trailing behind him. Their laughter and crude jokes grew louder as they approached, creating an unsettling contrast to the serene park. Rick stopped a few feet from the bench, crossing his arms as he looked down at Marcus. "I'm talking to you," he said louder, his tone sharp. Marcus lifted his head, his calm, piercing gaze meeting Rick's. For a moment, Rick hesitated, but his pride overrode any unease. "You deaf, old man?" he taunted, grinning. "No," Marcus replied evenly, "just enjoying my day." Rick smirked. "Well, you're sitting on my bench," he said, his tone mocking. "So, how about you get up and find another spot?" Marcus raised an eyebrow but didn't move. "Your bench?" he asked, his voice calm, almost curious. "That's right," Rick said, his grin widening as his gang laughed. "Now, move along." "I'm comfortable here," Marcus said simply, leaning back slightly. The calmness in his voice seemed to annoy Rick more than outright defiance. The subtle authority in his tone only made Rick angrier. Rick stepped closer. "You got a death wish?" he growled, his voice low and threatening. But Marcus didn't flinch. His expression remained neutral, his gaze steady. Mistaking calm for weakness, Rick snatched the army cap from Marcus's head. With a smug grin, Rick tossed the cap to one of his gang members. The cap sailed through the air, caught by a wiry man with a scar running down his cheek. He laughed and tossed it to another, and soon the gang was playing a crude game of catch. Their laughter echoed across the park, drawing the attention of more onlookers. Parents whispered nervously, ushering their children away. Marcus stood slowly, his tall, broad frame towering over Rick. The laughter faltered as the bikers realized just how imposing Marcus was. "Give it back," Marcus said, his voice low and firm. "Or what?" Rick challenged, stepping closer, his bravado intact. His gang exchanged uneasy glances, sensing the tension. Marcus didn't respond. His calm gaze and unflinching posture spoke volumes. The wiry biker with the scar decided to test him. He lunged forward, aiming to shove Marcus, but Marcus moved with precision. He caught the man's wrist mid-air, twisting it with practiced ease. A sharp cry of pain escaped the biker's lips as he dropped to his knees, clutching his arm. Gasps rippled through the small crowd of onlookers. "Enough," Marcus said, releasing the man who stumbled back, clutching his wrist. Rick's cocky grin faltered, replaced by a flicker of uncertainty. But instead of retreating, Rick barked at his gang, "What are you waiting for? Take him." The bikers hesitated, glancing at one another uncertainly. They had expected an easy target, not someone who could neutralize one of them so effortlessly. But Rick's pride was on the line, and he wasn't about to back down. They began to circle Marcus, who squared his shoulders, his stance relaxed but ready. He wasn't looking for a fight, but he was more than prepared to finish one. The park fell silent except for the low growl of a few motorcycle engines. Onlookers froze, their eyes fixed on the unfolding scene. Marcus stood steady, his calm demeanor unshaken, as Rick's gang began to close in. Though their confidence had been rattled after Marcus neutralized one of them, Rick's pride wouldn't let them retreat. Every step they took brought them closer to a fight Marcus hadn't started, but one he was prepared to finish. Rick motioned for his men to fan out, surrounding Marcus like wolves circling prey. The tension in the air was palpable, the weight of the moment pressing down on everyone watching. Marcus shifted slightly, his feet planted firmly, his muscles coiled like springs. He had no intention of escalating the situation, but if forced, he would respond with precision. "You've got guts, I'll give you that," Rick sneered, his voice dripping with mock admiration. "But guts won't help you when you're outnumbered." Marcus tilted his head slightly, his calm eyes locking on Rick. "Walk away," he said, his voice calm yet commanding. "No one has to get hurt." Rick laughed harshly. "Hurt? Oh, buddy, you're the one who's going to be hurting." He cracked his knuckles, gesturing for his gang to tighten their circle. Though the smirks on their faces tried to project confidence, their movements betrayed hesitation. Marcus remained composed, his mind calculating their next moves. He caught the subtle shifts in their body language, the twitch of a hand reaching toward a pocket, the way one biker adjusted his stance. Marcus wasn't just observing, he was preparing. The first strike came suddenly. One of the larger bikers lunged at Marcus, his fist swinging in a wide arc. Marcus sidestepped effortlessly, grabbing the man's arm and twisting it behind his back. With a quick shove, he sent the biker sprawling into the dirt. The crowd gasped as Marcus returned to his original position, calm as if nothing had happened. "Anyone else?" Marcus asked, his voice carrying a sharp edge that made the gang falter. Rick's face darkened, his frustration evident. "Don't just stand there. Get him," he barked. Two bikers moved in simultaneously, one from the left and one from the right. Marcus ducked under the first swing and delivered a sharp elbow to the second man's stomach, knocking the wind out of him. Pivoting quickly, Marcus swept the legs out from under the first attacker, sending him crashing to the ground. The murmurs of the crowd grew louder, some pulling out their phones to record the spectacle. Marcus stood tall, his breathing steady, his movements precise and controlled. He wasn't fighting for show. He was fighting to end this nonsense as quickly as possible. Years of combat training had honed his reflexes to perfection. This wasn't a street brawl, it was a masterclass in control. Rick's confidence faltered, but his pride wouldn't let him back down. With a snarl, he pulled a switchblade from his pocket, flicking it open with a menacing click. "Let's see how tough you really are," he growled, advancing toward Marcus. The crowd gasped, a few shouting warnings, but Marcus didn't flinch. His eyes tracked the blade with precision. As Rick lunged, Marcus moved like lightning, his hand shooting out to grab Rick's wrist. With a sharp twist, the knife clattered to the ground and Rick let out a howl of pain. "Enough," Marcus said, his voice firm and commanding. He released Rick, who stumbled back, clutching his wrist and glaring at Marcus with a mix of rage and fear. The remaining bikers hesitated, their confidence shattered. They had underestimated Marcus, and now they were paying the price. Rick's bravado crumbled further as he realized he was losing control. "You'll regret this," he spat, backing away. "I doubt that," Marcus replied, his tone steady but final. The tension hung in the air as Rick glanced at his fallen men and the growing crowd of onlookers. Muttering curses, he motioned for his gang to retreat. One by one, the bikers limped back toward their motorcycles, their egos as bruised as their bodies. As the engines roared to life and the gang sped off, the park erupted into applause. Onlookers who had been frozen moments ago now cheered for Marcus, their admiration evident. A few parents approached him, offering their thanks. Marcus didn't revel in the attention. He bent down to retrieve his army cap, dusting it off before placing it back on his head. For him, this wasn't about showing off or seeking recognition. It was about standing up to bullies and protecting the peace he valued so much. An elderly man approached him, his face lined with gratitude. "Son, that was incredible." Marcus gave a polite nod. "Just did what needed to be done." The man hesitated. "You a fighter or something?" Marcus smiled faintly. "Just a soldier." With that, Marcus returned to his bench, letting the calm of the park wash over him once more. Though the peace had been disturbed, it was restored. And for Marcus, that was enough. The applause slowly faded, and the park returned to its usual rhythm. The laughter of children playing on the swings, the chatter of families strolling under the trees, and the occasional chirping of birds filled the air once more. Marcus sat back on the bench, his posture relaxed, but his mind remained sharp. He glanced at his watch, mentally calculating how much longer he could enjoy the peace before the responsibilities of life inevitably called him away. Across the park, a man in a dark hoodie leaned casually against a tree, but his eyes betrayed him. Fixed on Marcus, they didn't dart or wander like those of someone merely enjoying the scenery. His posture was casual, but the tension in his shoulders hinted at something else. He wasn't just watching, he was studying. He pulled a phone from his pocket, typed a quick message, and disappeared into the crowd. Unbeknownst to Marcus, that message set something in motion. Minutes later, 2 black SUVs pulled up at the far edge of the park, their engines humming softly. The vehicles looked unassuming, but the men who stepped out of them were anything but. Dressed in plain clothes, they moved with practiced precision. Their stiff postures, subtle hand signals, and the unmistakable bulges under their jackets revealed their purpose. They were armed and professional. The leader, a tall man with a military haircut and cold eyes, exchanged a glance with his team. "That's him," he muttered, nodding toward Marcus. "Clean and quiet." As the team spread out, blending seamlessly into the crowd, Marcus felt it. A subtle shift in the air, a faint prickle at the back of his neck. Years of training had fine-tuned his instincts, and they told him something was wrong. His eyes swept the park casually, noticing the small details. A man walking too deliberately, the faint glint of metal under a jacket. A mother pulling her child closer as if sensing the tension. One of the operatives approached him directly, taking a seat at the opposite end of the bench. His face was expressionless, but his posture was tense. Marcus turned slightly, his voice calm but firm. "You're sitting too close for comfort." The man smirked. "It's a public bench." Marcus leaned back, his gaze never leaving the man's hands. "You're not here for the view." Before the man could respond, Marcus caught a flicker of movement in his peripheral vision. He stood abruptly, stepping away from the bench. "You've got 3 seconds to tell me what this is about," he said, his tone low and steady. The man didn't answer. Instead, his hand darted into his jacket, pulling out a pistol fitted with a silencer. "You shouldn't have interfered," he said coldly, but Marcus was already moving. Before the weapon could be raised, he grabbed the man's wrist, twisting sharply. The gun clattered to the ground, and Marcus delivered a quick, controlled strike to the man's throat, rendering him unconscious. The crowd, blissfully unaware, continued enjoying their day, oblivious to the growing danger. The remaining operatives sprang into action, drawing their weapons and advancing. Marcus ducked behind a nearby tree, scooping up the fallen pistol. His movements were smooth and deliberate. He had no intention of firing. Innocent lives were too close, but he needed to neutralize the threat quickly. One of the men rounded the tree, weapon raised. Marcus stepped into his path, disarming him with a swift motion. A hard shove sent the operative sprawling, his gun skidding across the grass. Marcus grabbed the man's jacket, using it as a shield as two more attackers closed in. The team leader barked orders, his voice sharp and urgent. "Take him down. Don't let him escape." Marcus's mind raced. He flung the jacket toward one of the operatives, momentarily distracting him. In that brief window, Marcus surged forward, delivering a powerful kick to the man's chest. The operative crumpled to the ground, winded. The remaining attackers regrouped, their movements more coordinated. Marcus could tell they were highly trained, but they had underestimated him. Using the park's natural layout, he blended into the crowd, moving swiftly. He ducked behind a row of bushes, scanning for an opportunity to break free. A voice crackled over one of the operatives' earpieces. "Abort! We can't risk exposure. Pull back." The leader hesitated, clearly frustrated, but the voice wasn't giving him a choice. With a sharp hand signal, he ordered the team to retreat. The operatives moved as efficiently as they had arrived, disappearing into the SUVs. Within moments, they were gone, leaving no trace. Marcus stepped out from behind the bushes, his eyes narrowing as he watched the vehicles speed away. He adjusted his cap, his mind already racing through possibilities. This wasn't a random attack. It was calculated, and whoever was behind it wouldn't stop at one failed attempt. As the park settled back into its tranquil rhythm, Marcus knew his day off was over. Trouble was brewing, and this was only the beginning. The sun dipped lower in the sky as Marcus walked briskly through the park, his mind racing. The failed ambush replayed in his head, every movement, every detail scrutinized. These weren't petty criminals. They were trained operatives sent with a clear objective. But who had sent them, and why? Marcus wasn't one to wait for answers. He preferred to go looking for them. Reaching a quieter part of the park, Marcus pulled out his phone. He scrolled through his contacts until he found the name he was looking for. Thomas Rourke. Rourke was an old friend from his military days, now working in private security. If anyone could help him make sense of what had just happened, it was Rourke. The phone rang twice before a gruff voice answered. "Reid. Been a while." "Not long enough," Marcus replied, a faint smirk crossing his face. "I need a favor." "Figured. What's going on?" "Ran into some trouble. Professional kind. Need intel on a team operating in the city. Plain clothes, armed, coordinated." There was a pause. "You're not giving me much to work with, but I'll see what I can dig up. Any idea who might be after you?" "Not yet," Marcus admitted, "but they'll come again. I need to be ready." "I'll call you back in an hour," Rourke said. "Stay sharp." Marcus hung up, slipping the phone back into his pocket. He scanned his surroundings, instincts on high alert. The park was thinning out as evening approached, but Marcus knew better than to relax. Whoever was after him wouldn't wait long to strike again. As he made his way toward the park's exit, he noticed a black sedan parked near the curb. The windows were tinted, and the engine idled softly. Marcus's eyes narrowed. He changed direction, blending into a group of joggers heading toward a nearby trail. From his new vantage point, he watched the sedan. Two men sat inside, their silhouettes faintly visible through the glass. They weren't locals, and they weren't just waiting for someone. Marcus's gut told him they were watching for him. Circling around the trail, Marcus used the trees as cover. He moved silently, his years of training guiding his steps. As he approached the sedan from the side, he caught a snippet of conversation over a radio. "Target hasn't exited yet. Should we move in?" "Negative," another voice replied. "Hold position. Wait for confirmation." Marcus stepped closer, crouching low to avoid detection. He could see the men clearly now, one in the driver's seat, the other holding a small tablet displaying what looked like a live feed of the park's main entrance. Surveillance equipment. Whoever these people were, they had resources. He weighed his options. Engaging them here would draw attention, but letting them track him wasn't an option either. Marcus decided on a third approach. He picked up a small rock from the ground and tossed it toward a cluster of bushes a few meters away. The sound was faint but enough to make the driver flinch and glance toward the noise. Using the distraction, Marcus moved quickly. He opened the rear door of the sedan, slipping inside before either man could react. The element of surprise worked in his favor. He grabbed the driver by the back of his neck, slamming his head into the steering wheel. The second man reached for his weapon, but Marcus was faster, disarming him with a swift motion and pinning him against the door. "Who sent you?" Marcus demanded, his voice low and dangerous. The man hesitated, his eyes darting toward his unconscious partner. "I don't know. Just following orders." Marcus tightened his grip. "Wrong answer." All right, the man gasped. "We're with Aegis, private contractors. We were hired to track you, not engage." "Who hired you?" "I don't know. We get orders through an encrypted system, no names." Marcus studied the man's face, searching for any sign of deception. He saw fear, but no lies. With a sharp movement, he released him. "Get out of the car, both of you." The man scrambled out, dragging his unconscious partner with him. Marcus climbed into the driver's seat, quickly scanning the dashboard for any clues. The tablet was still active, showing multiple camera feeds around the park. They'd been monitoring him from the moment he arrived. Marcus pocketed the tablet, started the engine, and drove off. In the rearview mirror, he saw the two men standing by the curb, helpless. He didn't feel guilty. They were players in a game he hadn't signed up for, and he needed every advantage he could get. As he navigated the city streets, Marcus plugged the tablet into a small device he kept in his bag, a military-grade data decryptor. The screen flickered as the system worked to bypass the encryption. It didn't take long before a list of recent commands appeared, each one time-stamped and originating from a single source. Aegis Command Center. Marcus's jaw tightened. Aegis wasn't a small-time outfit. They were one of the largest private security firms in the world, known for handling high-profile contracts with military precision. If they were involved, this was bigger than he'd thought. His phone buzzed, and Rourke's name flashed on the screen. Marcus answered. "Tell me you've got something." "I do," Rourke said. "Your description matches a team operating under Aegis. They're good, ex-military mostly, but here's the kicker. They don't move without a big paycheck. Whoever hired them has deep pockets." "Any idea what they want with me?" "Not yet," Rourke admitted, "but I'll keep digging. Watch your back, Reid. These guys don't play around." Marcus ended the call, his grip tightening on the steering wheel. He didn't need Rourke to tell him to be careful. He knew the stakes, and he knew this was far from over. As he pulled into an empty parking lot, Marcus shut off the engine and leaned back in the seat, his mind racing. Aegis, a faceless client, trained operatives, all pieces of a puzzle he didn't yet understand. But he would. One way or another, Marcus would find out who was after him and why. Marcus sat quietly in the dimly lit parking lot, his fingers tapping rhythmically against the steering wheel as the events of the day replayed in his mind. Aegis, a name he hadn't heard in years. He'd crossed paths with the private security firm during his military career, but they had always operated in the shadows, taking on high-profile contracts for corporations and governments. Now, they were after him, and that could only mean one thing: Someone with deep pockets had a personal interest in taking him down. The glow of the decrypted tablet's screen illuminated the car's interior as Marcus sifted through the files. Commands, surveillance logs, timestamps. It was all there. But one line caught his attention. Operation Kestrel. Target must be neutralized before Phase 2. His eyes narrowed. Phase 2? What the hell was that? Before he could dig further, the tablet beeped. A notification flashed across the screen. Remote system override detected. Files erasing in 5, 4. Marcus acted on instinct, yanking the tablet's cable from the decryptor. But it was too late. The files disappeared one by one, leaving only a blank screen and a blinking cursor. Whoever was behind this had covered their tracks well. A loud knock on the car window jolted him. His hand moved instinctively toward the pistol on the passenger seat. Peering through the glass, he saw a familiar face. Rourke. The older man stood with a grim expression, his hand resting casually on his hip, where Marcus knew he always carried a concealed weapon. Marcus unlocked the door, and Rourke slid into the passenger seat. "You're not making any friends tonight," Rourke said, his voice laced with dry humor. "I tracked your signal. You're lucky it was me, and not someone else." "Didn't expect company," Marcus replied, his tone neutral. "What do you have for me?" Rourke pulled out a folder and handed it to Marcus. "Your Aegis friends have been busy. They've got operations running across the city, high-level stuff. But this?" He tapped a document inside the folder. "This is different. They're not just after you. They're cleaning house." Marcus frowned. "Explain." "They've been targeting people connected to a classified military project. Ex-soldiers, contractors, anyone with knowledge of something called Kestrel. Ring any bells?" Marcus's jaw tightened. He had heard whispers of Project Kestrel during his final years of service, a Black Ops initiative rumored to involve cutting-edge surveillance tech and covert operations. But he'd never been directly involved. "I was never part of it," he said, shaking his head, "but I knew people who were." Rourke nodded. "That makes sense. They're tying up loose ends. You may not have been part of the project, but someone thinks you know too much." Marcus leaned back, his mind racing. If Aegis was erasing everyone linked to Kestrel, then this was bigger than he'd thought. "Who's running the show?" "That's the million-dollar question," Rourke said. "Aegis answers to their clients, and those clients are ghosts. No names, no faces, just money." Marcus stared at the folder, his thoughts churning. "I need leverage. Something to make them back off." Rourke raised an eyebrow. "Leverage against Aegis? You're playing a dangerous game, Reid." "Dangerous is the only game I know," Marcus replied. He closed the folder and started the car. "Where do I find them?" Rourke sighed, rubbing his temple. "There's a warehouse on the edge of the industrial district. It's not an official base, but it's where their local team operates. You'll find answers there, or a whole lot of trouble." "Trouble I can handle," Marcus said, putting the car in gear. "Thanks, Rourke." "Don't thank me yet," Rourke muttered. "You might not like what you find." The warehouse loomed in the distance, its dark silhouette stark against the faint glow of city lights. Marcus parked a few blocks away, opting to approach on foot. The area was eerily quiet, the only sounds the occasional rumble of a passing truck and the faint hum of electricity from nearby power lines. Marcus moved like a shadow, his steps silent as he crossed the street and slipped into an alley. He spotted 2 guards near the warehouse entrance, their postures relaxed but alert. They were armed, their weapons slung casually across their shoulders. Amateurs, Marcus thought. Aegis didn't send their best to guard a place like this. He waited until one of the guards stepped away to light a cigarette. Moving swiftly, Marcus closed the distance, grabbing the second guard from behind and pulling him into the shadows. A quick chokehold rendered the man unconscious. Marcus dragged the body behind a dumpster, his movements efficient and silent. The second guard returned moments later, oblivious to his partner's absence. Marcus struck before the man could react, delivering a precise blow to the side of his head. The guard crumpled to the ground, his cigarette falling from his lips. Marcus slipped inside the warehouse, his eyes adjusting to the dim lighting. Stacks of crates lined the walls, and the air smelled of oil and metal. He moved cautiously, his ears straining for any sound. Voices echoed from a room at the far end of the building. He crept closer, pressing himself against the wall outside the room. The door was slightly ajar, allowing him to see inside. 3 men sat around a table, their faces illuminated by the glow of a laptop screen. On the screen was a map of the city, with several locations marked in red. "This is the last one," one of the men said, his voice low. "Once we take care of him, Phase 2 begins." Marcus's jaw tightened. They were talking about him. He needed to act quickly. He pushed the door open and stepped inside, his pistol aimed steadily at the men. "Hands where I can see them." The men froze, their eyes wide with shock. One of them reached for his weapon, but Marcus fired a warning shot into the wall. "Don't. Try. Me." "You don't know what you're getting into," one of the men hissed. "Then educate me," Marcus said, his tone cold. "Who's pulling the strings?" The man hesitated, sweat beading on his forehead. "You're already dead," he muttered. "You just don't know it yet." Marcus's finger tightened on the trigger. "Wrong answer." The room was silent except for Marcus's steady breathing and the faint hum of the laptop. The 3 men sat frozen, their hands raised in surrender, eyes flickering between Marcus's pistol and the door. Marcus wasn't interested in their fear. He wanted answers. "Talk," Marcus demanded, his voice low and cold. "Who's running this operation?" The man closest to him, the one who had spoken earlier, swallowed hard. "You don't understand. If I talk, I'm dead." Marcus tilted his head slightly, his fingers still resting lightly on the trigger. "If you don't talk, you're dead right now. Your call." The man hesitated, his eyes darting toward the others. One of them, younger and clearly less experienced, broke under the pressure. "It's," he began, but the older man next to him cut him off with a sharp glare. "Shut up," the older man hissed. "You'll get us all killed." Marcus stepped closer, his pistol now aimed squarely at the older man. "You're already playing a losing game. Start talking, or I'll make sure you don't leave this room." The older man gritted his teeth, sweat forming on his brow. "You're looking for ghosts. The people behind this, you'll never touch them." "Try me," Marcus said, his tone icy. The younger man, now visibly shaking, couldn't hold back any longer. "It's Kestrel," he blurted out. "The operation. It's tied to Kestrel." Marcus's eyes narrowed. "I know that much. What's Phase 2? The room fell silent again. But this time, the tension was unbearable. The older man looked like he was weighing his options, but before he could speak, faint footsteps echoed from the hallway outside. Marcus turned his head slightly, his ears straining to pick up the sound. Someone was coming. "Back up," Marcus asked, his voice sharp. The younger man shook his head frantically. "No, we didn't call anyone, I swear." Marcus didn't have time to figure out whether he was lying. He moved quickly, yanking the younger man to his feet and using him as a shield. "Stay close," Marcus ordered, his pistol still trained on the other 2. "You 2, hands where I can see them. Move to the corner." The 2 men obeyed, their expressions a mixture of fear and defiance. Marcus backed toward the door, his hostage in tow. The footsteps grew louder, and Marcus could now hear muffled voices. Whoever was coming wasn't trying to be stealthy. He glanced at the laptop screen one last time. The map of the city was still displayed with several locations marked in red. One of the locations flashed briefly before disappearing. Marcus committed it to memory, his instincts telling him it was critical. The door burst open, and 2 heavily armed operatives stormed in, their weapons raised. Marcus reacted instantly, pulling his hostage in front of him as a human shield. "Drop your weapons," he barked, his voice echoing through the room. The operatives hesitated. their eyes flicking to the hostage. Marcus used their hesitation to his advantage, firing a single shot into the leg of the operative on the right. The man went down with a cry of pain, his weapon clattering to the floor. The second operative moved to fire, but Marcus was faster. A precise shot disarmed him, the weapon flying out of his hand. "On the ground," Marcus ordered. The remaining operative dropped to his knees, his hands raised. Marcus scanned the room quickly, his hostage trembling in his grip. "You're coming with me," Marcus said, dragging the younger man toward the door. The older man shouted after him, his voice filled with both anger and fear. "You're making a mistake, Reid. You can't stop this." Marcus didn't respond. He moved quickly, his hostage stumbling behind him. The hallway outside was clear for now, but Marcus knew it wouldn't stay that way for long. He needed to get out of the building, and fast. They reached the back entrance where Marcus forced his hostage into the passenger seat of a nearby car. Sliding into the driver's seat, Marcus started the engine and sped away, leaving the warehouse behind. His mind raced as he navigated the empty streets. He had what he needed, a lead, a direction, but the clock was ticking. The younger man sat silently, his hands trembling in his lap. Marcus glanced at him briefly. "What's your name?" Jared, the man stammered. "All right, Jared, you're going to tell me everything you know about Phase 2. Jared nodded quickly, his fear outweighing any loyalty he had to Aegis. Phase 2. It's the activation phase. The locations on that map. They're all tied to Kestrel. It's a network, a system designed to track and eliminate targets in real time. Phase 2 is when they turn it on." Marcus's grip tightened on the steering wheel. "And who are the targets?" Jared hesitated, then said, "People like you. Anyone who knows too much or poses a threat to the operation. Once Phase 2 starts, there's no stopping it." Marcus's jaw clenched. "And who's running this?" Jared shook his head. "I don't know. We only get orders through the system. No names, no faces, just commands." Marcus drove in silence for a moment, his mind processing the information. Kestrel wasn't just a surveillance operation, it was a kill program, and he was at the top of the list. But now he had a lead. The flashing location on the map. It had to be the central hub, the place where Kestrel was controlled. He pulled the car into an empty lot and turned to Jared. "You're going to help me shut this down." Jared's eyes widened in fear. "You don't understand. If we go near that hub, we're dead." Marcus leaned closer, his voice cold and determined. "If we don't, everyone on that list is dead, including me. Now, are you going to help me, or do I leave you here for Aegis to find?" Jared swallowed hard and nodded. "All right, I'll help." Marcus nodded, his expression grim. "Good. We don't have much time." As the first light of dawn broke over the horizon, Marcus started the car again, his destination clear. The fight wasn't over. Not yet. But Marcus had faced impossible odds before, and he wasn't about to back down. Whoever was pulling the strings had made one critical mistake. They'd underestimated him, and that was a mistake they wouldn't live to regret.